The sun shone brightly over a picturesque neighborhood, where tall oak trees shaded the sidewalks, and laughter often echoed in the distance. Among its residents were two inseparable friends, Elena and Marie. They had known each other since childhood, their bond as thick as blood, or so it seemed to everyone who knew them. Elena was radiant and warm, with a magnetic personality that drew people in. She was married to James, a loving and devoted husband who adored her. Together, they had built a life full of joy, laughter, and mutual respect. Marie, on the other hand, was more reserved. She often played the role of a supportive confidant, always by Elena's side, quietly observing but never truly revealing her innermost thoughts. As we continue, please, do not forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. So much goes into bringing this to you, therefore, clicking on the subscribe button would mean a lot. Talking about Elena's friendship with Marie, they had a seemingly harmonious relationship that most people admired. They rarely argued, at least not outwardly. However, there were subtle moments of tension that Elena, in her generous nature, brushed aside. One such incident occurred a few months before Elena's illness. Marie had made a comment about how lucky Elena was to have James, implying that someone like her didn't deserve a man so accomplished and attentive. Elena, caught off guard, laughed it off, dismissing it as an awkward joke. She never let herself believe that Marie harbored deeper resentments. Meanwhile, Marie had secretly harbored feelings for James for years. Every moment spent with the couple fed a silent envy that gnawed at her insides. She would never admit it, but seeing James and Elena's happiness left her bitter and resentful. Her longing for a life like Elena's turned into an obsession, and soon, that obsession began to poison her heart and mind. Elena and James had no children, though they had talked about starting a family. Elena had been focused on her career as an interior designer, and they had mutually decided to wait until they felt ready. They both dreamed of having kids someday, often imagining a home filled with laughter and tiny footsteps. This shared dream made their bond even stronger, and their home was already filled with warmth and love. Marie, however, often expressed mock sympathy for Elena's lack of children, saying things like, "It must be lonely not having little ones around." Elena never suspected the veiled malice behind such words. James loves his wife Elena so much and never had an affair with any other woman, not even Marie, who tended to throw herself on him sometimes. He was utterly devoted to Elena, and his love for her was evident to everyone around them. James admired Elena's intelligence, kindness, and sense of humor, qualities that far overshadowed anything Marie could offer. Marie, however, wasn't above trying to insert herself into James's life in inappropriate ways. While Elena was away sometimes, Marie did try to seduce James subtly. She would show up unannounced at their home, often under the guise of needing advice or help. On one occasion, she wore a dress far more revealing than the situation warranted and leaned a little too closely when asking James to help fix something in her car. James, uncomfortable but polite, always kept his distance. He saw her actions as strange but didn't dwell on them, thinking it was his duty as Elena's best friend to give Marie the benefit of the doubt. Unbeknownst to Marie, James told Elena about her behavior during one of their heartfelt conversations. Elena, always trusting, didn't want to believe her best friend was capable of such betrayal. She chalked it up to misunderstanding, saying, "Marie can be a bit forward, but she means well." James, out of respect for his wife's wishes, let the matter drop but remained wary of Marie. One evening, as the three of them enjoyed dinner together at Elena and James's house, Marie observed the couple's easy banter and shared laughter. Her jealousy reached a boiling point. That night, as she walked home, her mind raced with thoughts of what life could be if Elena were no longer in the picture. The idea started as a fleeting notion, but it soon grew roots, becoming a plan too tempting for her to resist. Marie began researching poisons, how they worked, their effects, and how to make them appear as natural causes. She justified her actions by convincing herself that she deserved happiness, that fate had simply misplaced James with the wrong woman. Her mind twisted every rationale into a justification for what she was about to do. Weeks later, she invited Elena over for a casual lunch at her house. The two women laughed as they reminisced about their childhood, but Marie's smile masked the turmoil inside her. When the tea was served, Elena unknowingly sipped from a cup laced with a slow-acting poison. Marie had chosen something subtle, one that mimicked the symptoms of an undiagnosed illness. The perfect crime, she thought. Elena began feeling unwell over the following days. Fatigue, dizziness, and nausea plagued her, baffling both her and James. When Elena fell ill, the symptoms were subtle at first, a mild fatigue she attributed to stress and overwork. However, as time passed, her health deteriorated rapidly. She began experiencing severe nausea, unexplained weight loss, and crippling stomach pain. There were visits to the hospital. Doctors were initially baffled, diagnosing her condition as probably gastrointestinal issue or potential food poisoning, but none of the standard treatments worked. Tests showed unusual levels of toxins in her system, though they couldn't immediately pinpoint the exact source, and her condition worsened. James grew increasingly worried, staying by her side day and night. Meanwhile, Marie feigned concern, bringing over soup and flowers, playing the role of the doting friend. Marie's attempts became bolder when Elena started showing signs of illness. She took advantage of James's vulnerability, offering him comfort in ways that crossed boundaries. She would touch his arm for just a little too long or insist on staying late to help out. James, despite his worry for Elena, remained steadfast and rejected every advance, even subtly mentioning to Marie how much he valued his wife and their marriage. Elena, intelligent and perceptive as she was, began to reflect on the events leading up to her illness. The last time she felt perfectly healthy was just before a visit to Marie's house. That day, Marie had prepared an elaborate tea service, complete with a blend of exotic herbal teas that Marie claimed were good for relaxation. Elena remembered the peculiar taste of the tea she drank that evening, slightly bitter, even though Marie assured her it was supposed to be that way. As Elena's condition worsened, she mentioned the tea in passing to James during a quiet evening at home. "It's strange," she murmured, her voice weak. "I've never felt quite right since that day at Marie's. That tea. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence." James, trying to comfort her, dismissed the thought as paranoia brought on by her illness. "You're just overthinking, my love. Marie wouldn't hurt you. She's your best friend." Elena, unwilling to believe that Marie could have any ill intent, pushed the thought aside. But a lingering doubt remained. In her final weeks, during a particularly vulnerable moment, she brought it up again. "James, if something happens to me, promise me you'll look after Marie. I don't know why I'm even saying this, but she's always been so complicated. Maybe I should have done more to understand her." James was puzzled by the comment, but he promised nonetheless, thinking it was just Elena's kind heart speaking even in the face of her suffering. One night, as Elena lay in bed, her body weakened beyond recognition, she confided in James. She spoke of her love for him and her trust in Marie, urging him to keep the friendship alive even if she wasn't around. James held her hand tightly, promising to stand by her no matter what. Elena passed away a few days later. It was indeed devastating for James, as he had only loved one woman, Elena, all his life. It wasn't until after Elena passed away that James began to piece together the truth. A toxicology report ordered posthumously revealed the presence of a rare plant-based toxin in Elena's system, something often found in herbal concoctions. James was horrified, and the memory of Elena mentioning the tea came rushing back. Although, James, not fully convinced that Marie had poisoned his wife, he began looking deeper into her actions and motives, trying to uncover the dark and twisted reality of what had been done. James didn't confront Marie immediately after receiving the toxicology report. The realization that Marie, someone he had trusted and considered family, could be responsible for his wife's death left him in shock and denial. He spent weeks in quiet grief, replaying every moment of Elena's illness and every interaction with Marie. At first, he was reluctant to believe it. Could someone be so cruel as to harm their best friend? He said to himself. Elena's funeral was a somber affair, attended by family, friends, and neighbors who adored her. Marie wept dramatically, drawing sympathetic glances from those around her. James was inconsolable, retreating into a shell of grief that left him vulnerable. Months passed, and Marie began inserting herself more prominently into James's life. She offered to help him with errands, comforted him in his moments of despair, and eventually convinced him to let her move in temporarily to help care for the home. James, too grief-stricken to question her motives, agreed. Marie believed she had won. She imagined herself as the new Mrs. James, living the life she had always dreamed of. But life has a way of balancing the scales, and karma was already in motion. Elena may not have fully realized the extent of Marie's betrayal before her death, but her intuition had been right. Her subtle warnings to James planted more seeds of doubt that would eventually lead to justice being served. Determined to uncover the truth, James began conducting his own investigation. He went through Elena's belongings, searching for clues that might corroborate his suspicions. Among her journals, he found an entry where she mentioned feeling uneasy after the tea at Marie's house. In it, Elena had documented her suspicions about her declining health, mentioning how odd it was that she always felt worse after visiting Marie. It tasted odd, bitter. Marie said it was a rare blend, but I can't shake the feeling something was off, the entry read. She wrote about her unwavering trust in James and her love for him, even in the face of death. The entries raised questions in James's mind, questions he couldn't ignore. James also sought out Elena's close friends, discreetly asking if they noticed anything unusual about Marie. One friend confided that Marie had often expressed jealousy over Elena's marriage, even making passive-aggressive remarks about how perfect James and Elena seemed together. This investigation took months, as James methodically built a case without alerting Marie. He also hired a private investigator, who discovered that Marie had ordered a small quantity of a rare toxic plant online, internet searches on Marie's laptop about poisons, and visits to obscure shops where such substances were sold. These were just weeks before Elena's illness began. The investigator also found Marie had been looking up herbal toxicity levels in medical journals, a damning trail of evidence. When James finally confronted Marie about the strange coincidences, it wasn't in the heat of anger but with cold, calculated precision. He invited her out for tea, more like a tea date, the irony of which wasn't lost on him. As she sat unsuspectingly, he laid out the evidence, the toxicology report, the journal entry, the online purchases, and her suspicious internet search history. Marie's demeanor shifted from feigned innocence to defensiveness and finally to desperate denial. "You can't prove any of this," she shouted. But James had already taken everything to the authorities. Marie was arrested and charged to court. These moments became clearer in hindsight, especially after Elena's death. James realized that Marie's actions weren't just inappropriate, they were calculated steps in her twisted plan. Marie's resentment toward Elena had fueled her desire not only to take James but to erase Elena entirely from the picture. It was a betrayal that cut deeply, leaving scars that would take James a long time to heal. The case went to trial, where the prosecution painted a chilling picture of Marie's envy and betrayal. In court, her true nature was laid bare for all to see. The woman who had once been seen as a loyal friend was now exposed as a manipulative and envious schemer. The prosecution argued that her actions stemmed from an obsessive desire to have James for herself. The jury was unanimous in their verdict. Marie was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Her cold, calculated poisoning of her best friend shocked everyone who had known her and sent shockwaves through the community. In the years that followed, James struggled to move on from the trauma of losing Elena and the betrayal by someone he had trusted. He threw himself into his work, focusing on projects that helped him cope with his grief. For a long time, he couldn't imagine finding love again, feeling that no one could fill the void Elena had left. The ordeal left him shattered but also stronger. He honored Elena's memory by starting a foundation in her name, dedicated to helping victims of betrayal and abuse. But as the years passed, James slowly opened his heart. About 5 years after Elena's death, he met someone who understood his pain, a widowed counselor named Laura. She had her own scars from loss, and their shared experiences allowed them to connect on a profound level. Their relationship wasn't about replacing what they had lost but about building something new together. Laura's gentle support helped James find peace, and together they created a loving, blended family. As for Marie, now haunted by the consequences of her actions, her years in prison were filled with regret and bitterness. Her dreams of a perfect life had turned into a nightmare of her own making. She had achieved nothing with her betrayal, and the one man she had hoped to win over saw her for who she truly was. Karma, it seemed, had delivered its verdict. Thank you for watching. Please, like, share, and subscribe to Home of Stories TV. And do not forget to turn on the notification bell for more inspiring videos. Drop your comments below, let us know your thoughts.